Just try to imagine this. I show up to my daughter's wedding, a girl I spent 25 years raising by myself, a girl I literally gave my whole life to. And she just looks me right in the eye and tells me, "Dad, I'm so sorry, but you weren't on the list. You need to leave." I didn't even bother asking her why. I just stood there, holding a gift I'd wrapped myself, in the grand ballroom I'd paid for, and I walked out without a word. But inside of 3 hours, her picture-perfect wedding was a disaster. Revenge? Nah. This was justice. Before we get into it, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from today. The moment her words hit me, that fancy champagne glass just slipped from my hand. I didn't hear the crash, only the way she flinched when the glass shattered all over the floor. It wasn't because she was scared. She was embarrassed, like I was some kind of stain on her perfect, big-money painting. I was standing in the front entryway of the Belmont Manor ballroom, under a giant crystal light fixture that seemed to judge me, holding a plain white box tied with a satin ribbon. It was the same kind of ribbon she used to tie on her pigtails in the 2nd grade, back when she thought everything I did was the coolest thing ever. Ingrid turned her head, and for a second, the whole room just went silent. Not a big, obvious silence, but one of those moments where everyone in their expensive clothes just shifts a little, because something isn't right. The chatter got quiet. The string quartet even missed a note. Then she walked up, her heels clicking on the polished floor like she was marking her words. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Her voice was soft, but hard at the same time, like a velvet rope you aren't supposed to cross. Her new husband, Helmut, came up behind her, smiling the way guys do when they're trying to manage a messy situation. I'd seen that fake smile a bunch of times before, on clients who were trying to look happy while they were losing a contract. I gave him a polite nod. He didn't offer to shake my hand. "You weren't supposed to come," Ingrid said. Her voice sounded rehearsed, like she'd been practicing it. I looked around at the place. White orchids shipped in from Colombia, gold-rimmed plates, champagne towers made of crystal, everything was shining, everything was expensive, everything I paid for. My voice was calm, but my chest felt like it was getting hammered flat. Just wanted to see my daughter on her big day. "Dad," she said, looking over at the crowd, making sure she kept smiling as she spoke. "This is just for immediate family." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask where that left me. I just stared at her. The same girl who used to write me little poems for Father's Day with a glitter pen, who would crawl into my bed with her stuffed rabbit when a thunderstorm made her cry. Now, all grown up in a dress made of imported silk that cost maybe $11,000, she couldn't even say my name out loud. "I understand," I told her. My hand squeezed the gift box for a second, then I let go. I set it down on a cocktail table next to a flute of champagne nobody had touched. Wouldn't want to cause a scene. Ingrid didn't say a thing. Helmut put his hand on her back, gently guiding her away like a stage manager pulling a nervous actress off her cue. My feet didn't move. For a second, I thought I might just turn into one of those stone statues out front. But I didn't. I turned, walked past the servers, past the ushers, past the string quartet that was trying to find its melody again. Outside, the spring air hit me like a slap of reality. My old truck was sitting at the far end of the parking lot, squeezed between a landscaping van and a Mercedes that probably belonged to Helmut's uncle, the one with the vineyard in Napa. I'd parked over there on purpose, away from all the fancy cars. I knew my place. The cab of the truck smelled like lemon wipes and construction dust, a familiar, comforting smell. I sat there for a minute just staring at the steering wheel. 25 years. I raised her after her mom died in a hospital bed that still shows up in my nightmares. I read her books. I made her spaghetti the way she liked it and turned down promotions so I could get home early for school plays. I built my company from nothing while braiding hair in the mornings and helping out with science fair projects at night. And now she didn't even want me in the same building on the most important day of her life. That wasn't right. I picked up my phone, not to call her, not to beg. That part of me had died right there in that ballroom. I scrolled down to my business contacts and tapped the number I'd only ever used twice in the past 3 years. First Federal, this is Greta. Greta, this is Klaus Schneider. I need to talk to someone in business services. It's urgent. Certainly, Mr. Schneider. One moment. I heard that hold music crackle, then a different voice came on. First Federal Business Services. Gertrude speaking. Gertrude, I'd like to issue stop payments on all active transactions related to the Schneider-Hughes wedding. Effective immediately. There was a long pause. Sir, that includes the venue, catering, the music, and the flowers. I know exactly what it includes. Start with the Belmont Manor authorization account, the one that ends in 8882. Passcode 5KS73, confirmed. I gave her the codes from memory. That's what 22 years in construction teaches you, you never trust a contract you can't remember. Every time I listed another vendor, I felt lighter. Not like a vengeful jerk, but precise, like I was putting things back in balance. Would you like me to email you confirmation? She asked. I know it's done, I said. I hung up, opened the notepad on my phone. 5 more calls to make, caterer, florist, music, photographer, rentals. I started with Friedrich, the catering manager. Mr. Schneider, what's happening? Friedrich asked. The guests are seated. You're gonna want to start packing up. The payment's been pulled. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Sir, we have sea bass fillets in the oven. You'll have them in the van if you move fast. One by one, I made the calls. Every conversation was shorter than the last, and the tone got colder. Not out of anger, but pure efficiency. Years of running job sites taught me one simple truth: when something is built wrong, you don't just fix the paint. You rip out the foundation and start all over again. When I was done, I leaned back in my seat. The clock on my dashboard said 4:42 p.m. I looked back toward the manor. Inside that ballroom, they were still raising their glasses, still laughing, still basking in a fantasy paid for by a man they didn't even consider part of the story anymore. But the flowers would start disappearing soon. Then the music, then the food. One by one, the whole illusion was going to fall apart. Not because I wanted to ruin her day, but because she forgot who made it possible. And sometimes, the only way to teach someone the value of what they have is to take it away. The first call came in just as I was pulling out of the driveway. Her name flashed on the screen, Ingrid. It glowed like a little light in the shadows of my dashboard, right next to the gas gauge and the quiet hum of a truck that's been with me longer than most people in my life. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because for once, my silence was speaking louder than all the years of me saying yes. I let it ring until it stopped. Then I drove. The sky was gray and heavy with clouds, pressing down on me like a lifetime of memories. The roads I'd driven for decades felt different now. Less like a way home, more like a long, slow wind down. When I hit the first traffic light past the country club gates, the phone buzzed again. Ingrid. The second time. I flipped it face down on the passenger seat and kept going. 25 years. That's how long I had kept the world off her back. Ever since the day her mother, Gisela, died in a sterile hospital room that smelled of cleaning chemicals and loss. I'd been everything: dad, mom, tutor, banker, fixer of broken toys and broken hearts. I never remarried. I never dated. I just worked. I built Schneider Construction from nothing with my own 2 hands and a beat-up Ford, all while raising a daughter who thought the magic was in how I showed up for every recital, made every school lunch, and still managed to make payroll every Friday. But somewhere along the way, that magic turned into an expectation, and the expectation turned into entitlement. Dad, what is this? This can't be real. I could hear her trying to stay composed. Could hear Nathaniel in the background pacing, whispering, probably already calling his family lawyer. Everything in that letter is real, I said. Every receipt, every expense, every dollar. If anything, I lowballed it. You never said these were loans. I never said they were gifts, either. You assumed you can't just blindside me with this. I didn't blindside you. I sent a statement the same way you sent me the message that I wasn't welcome at your wedding. One-sided communication seems to be your style. Dad, please. People are starting to talk. Nathaniel's family is realizing the same thing I did, that everything you've built stands on someone else's back. She went quiet. I don't want this to become a public mess, she said finally. Then acknowledge what I've done, accept the cost, and grow from it. She didn't reply, not directly. The next day, a post appeared on her social media, something vague about family misunderstandings with a photo of her and Nathaniel holding hands on a balcony. I didn't comment, but I saved a copy of it. By Monday, the messages had shifted. Less angry, more uncertain. Dad, can we negotiate? Can I make a partial payment? Will you go public with this? Will you stop? But I didn't want revenge. I didn't want headlines. I just wanted her to finally do the one thing she had never done. Stop expecting. Start earning. The education had begun. Not in a classroom, not with tuition, but with silence, with consequences, with clarity. Love, it turns out, can be measured in more than words. It can be measured in sacrifice, in ledgers. What happens when the giving finally stops? It started like most storms do now, quietly, digitally behind a screen. The kind of storm where the clouds aren't gray, but curated, filtered, and captioned. The first ripple came through a text from my assistant, Rachel. Mr. Bennett, you may want to see what's trending on Facebook. I didn't have to look. I already felt it coming. The silence from Claire had shifted. There was too much pressure, too much visibility. So, naturally, they'd respond. The only way people like them know how to respond these days with performance. I opened the post. A photo of Claire and Nathaniel on their wedding day, backlit by sunset arms, linked smiles flawless. She looked radiant. He looked like a man who'd never heard the word consequence. The caption read, "We never thought our special day would be shattered, not by circumstance, but by someone we trusted." Sometimes even the people who raise you can break you the deepest. That was it. No names, no tags, just a soft blade slipped between the ribs. The comments did the rest. OMG, I can't believe your dad would do that. So toxic. You deserve better. This generation of parents needs to learn to let go. I sat still at my kitchen table, staring at the screen. Not angry, not shocked, just tired. I knew this strategy. They weren't fighting the facts. They were trying to win the room, not in court, but in public opinion. They knew I had numbers, but they also knew they had influence optics a certain sheen. I took a sip of coffee, cold now, and opened my laptop. 10 minutes later, another text came in. This time from a longtime client, someone I'd done 4 residential builds for over the past decade. "Hey, Rich. I just saw something online. Hope everything's alright. Let me know if it affects the Maplewood contract." That's when I knew they weren't just trying to hurt me emotionally. They were aiming at my reputation, my business, my name, the name I had spent 30 years building from plywood and dust. By noon, 3 other colleagues had called. All cautious, all polite. All were wondering if what they were seeing was true, and none of them had seen the invoices, but I had. I'd been sleeping beside those records for weeks. I didn't call Claire. I didn't respond to the smear. Instead, I called Margaret Clark, my attorney. "They're going public," I said. She exhaled. "Then, so are we." That's all it took. The next 8 hours were a masterclass in precision. We pulled every document, every tuition payment, every rent check, every car invoice, insurance premium, and credit card statement, every line of support I had provided since the day Claire was 3 and her mother died in a hospital that smelled like bleach and unfinished stories. We scanned, we redacted where necessary, we cataloged it all. Then I called Susan Lee, a senior editor at the Spokane Business Journal. She'd written about Bennett Construction 15 years ago when we broke ground on our first city contract. "Susan," I said, "I have a story you'll want to verify. I'm not looking for sympathy, just truth." By sunrise the next morning, the story was live. $935,000 in love won father's record of sacrifice. The headline sat above a banner image of scanned receipts and a spreadsheet that looked more like a government audit than a family ledger. The subheading read, "After being publicly shamed and disinvited from his only daughter's wedding, Richard Bennett released 28 years of documented financial support, including private education, housing, transportation, and lifestyle costs totaling nearly $1 million. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bitter. It was just factual. By mid-morning, the tide had shifted. Comments started flooding in beneath the article. "This man deserves an award, not a lawsuit. She threw him out of her wedding after he paid for all of it. My dad helped me with $5,000 and I still thank him weekly." $935,000, the internet, as fickle as it is, has one useful trait. It likes receipts. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad because it shouldn't have come to this. The love I gave Claire wasn't meant to be weaponized. But now it had to be documented so I wouldn't be erased. Around noon, I got a call from the Spokane Construction Alliance. "Rich, the board director, said, we saw the story. Just wanted you to know we're behind you." He didn't have to say more. That was enough. 3 hours later, the Rotary Club released a statement supporting transparent family communication and recognizing the often invisible sacrifices of single parents. Code for "We Believe Him." By sundown, local radio hosts were discussing it. One called it a cautionary tale of modern entitlement. Another said, "Every dad in America is printing receipts right now." Claire didn't post anything that day. Nathaniel, however, did. He shared a short paragraph on LinkedIn of all places. "Our wedding was disrupted by unfortunate miscommunications. We are focusing on healing and thank our community for its support." Corporate, vague, cowardly. I didn't respond, but the silence around them grew louder. That night, Claire finally called. For the first time in days, I picked up. "Dad," she said, her voice small. "What is happening?" "You tell me," I said. "I never thought you'd go public. I never thought you'd lie." There was a long pause. "I didn't lie," she said finally. "I just didn't explain. You told the world I was a bitter, controlling father who ruined your wedding out of pride. You forgot to mention the $935,000 that funded your entire adult life. I didn't know what else to do." People were asking questions. Nathaniel's family was furious. "So, you gave them a villain?" I panicked. "No, you curated." Her voice broke then. Not dramatically. Just a crack. The sound of someone whose reflection was finally changing shape. "I saw the article," she whispered. "Good. Now the world sees what I've seen for years." She didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She just said, "I don't know how to fix this." And I replied, "Maybe for once. Don't try to fix it. Just sit in it. Feel it." There was silence again, but this time it felt less like avoidance and more like acknowledgement. Later that week, I received a letter from Nathaniel's father handwritten on embossed stationery. He thanked me for the transparency. Said his family had been caught off guard and was re-evaluating its understanding of the situation. Translation: they'd been sold a false story and were now cleaning up the PR mess. I didn't respond because this was never about what the Hughes family believed. It was about what Claire refused to see until now. She posted nothing for days. Her page went quiet. The likes slowed. The comments shifted from sympathy to skepticism. People asked about the tuition numbers, the wedding invoices, the BMWs, the study abroad trips. They weren't attacking anymore. They were asking questions. And Claire had no answers. The story had moved from emotion to evidence. And in that space, I didn't need to speak. I just needed to stand still. Let truth do what it always does. Wait patiently while lies lose oxygen. They say reputation is like glass. Once cracked, it never truly goes back to what it was. But Claire had spent years polishing hers to a shine so bright, no one noticed the fractures beneath. That shine began to fade fast. First a flicker, then a blackout. 3 days after the article went live, her curated world began to unravel. It started quietly like all real collapses do. The whispers didn't come from tabloids or gossip blogs. They came from the places that mattered most to her, the charity board she chaired, the marketing firm she freelanced for, and most ironically, the mentorship program she co-founded for empowered young women navigating difficult family dynamics. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't gloat. I didn't repost a thing. I didn't share screenshots or write vague statuses. I let it unfold like rain. Inevitable, cleansing, uncomfortable. Because I wasn't orchestrating her downfall, I had merely stepped out of her narrative and let the truth fill the vacuum. Dad, what is this? This can't be happening. I could hear her trying to keep it together, but her voice was shaking. In the background, I heard Helmut pacing and whispering, probably already on the phone with his family's lawyer. Every single thing in that letter is real, I said. Every receipt, every single bill, every dollar. If anything, I probably lowballed it. You never said these were loans, she shot back. And I never said they were gifts either, I replied. You just assumed. You can't just blindside me with this. I didn't blindside you, I said calmly. I sent you a statement, just like you sent me the message that I wasn't wanted at your wedding. Looks like one-way communication is just the way we do things. Dad, please, she said. People are already starting to talk. Let them, I replied. Helmut's family is starting to figure out the same thing I did a long time ago, that everything you've got is built on someone else's back. She went quiet. I don't want this to turn into some big public mess, she said finally. Then all you have to do is acknowledge what I've done for you, accept the cost of it, and grow from there, I said. She didn't reply directly. The next day, she put up a post on social media, something vague about family issues, with a photo of her and Helmut holding hands on a balcony. I didn't leave a comment, but I saved a copy. By Monday, the texts had changed. Less angry, more uncertain. Dad, can we work something out? Can I give you some of it back? Are you going to go public with this? Will you stop? But I wasn't looking for revenge. I didn't want my name in the headlines. I just wanted her to finally do the one thing she had never done, stop expecting things and start earning them. The real education had begun. It wasn't in a lecture hall or with tuition, it was with silence, consequences, and a little bit of truth. Love, it turns out, can be measured in more than just words. It can also be measured in sacrifices and in ledgers. What happens when the giving finally stops? It started the way most storms do these days, quietly, and behind a screen. The kind of storm where the clouds aren't gray, but are carefully edited and captioned. The first hint came in a text from my assistant, Sabine. Mr. Schneider, you might want to see what's popular on Facebook. I didn't even have to look. I already knew it was coming. The silence from Ingrid had been a little too much. It was too much pressure, too visible. So of course, they had to respond. The only way people like them know how to respond in a public-facing world, with a performance. I opened the post. There was a photo of Ingrid and Helmut on their wedding day, all backlit by the setting sun, arms linked, with their smiles looking absolutely perfect. She looked amazing. He looked like a man who had never even heard the word consequence. The caption read, "We never thought our special day would be ruined, not by some unexpected problem, but by someone we trusted. Sometimes even the people who raise you can break you the deepest." That was it. No names, no tags, just a quiet dagger to the gut. The comments finished the job for her. "OMG, I can't believe your dad would do that," one said. "So toxic," said another. "You deserve better. This generation of parents needs to learn how to let go." I sat there at my kitchen table, staring at the screen. I wasn't angry or shocked, just tired. I knew this playbook. They weren't trying to argue the facts. They were trying to win the court of public opinion. They knew I had the numbers, but they also knew they had a certain kind of influence and a certain image to maintain. I took a sip of my coffee, which was cold by now, and opened my laptop. 15 minutes later, another text came in. This time, it was from a client I had done 5 residential builds for over the last decade. "Hey, Klaus. Just saw something online. Hope everything's all right. Let me know if it affects the Oakwood contract." That's when I knew they weren't just trying to hurt me on a personal level. They were going after my reputation, my business, my name, a name I had spent 27 years building from plywood and dust. By noon, 4 other colleagues had called. They were all careful and polite, all wondering if what they saw was true. Not a single one of them had seen the invoices, but I had. I had been sleeping with those records next to me for weeks. I didn't call Ingrid. I didn't respond to the lies. Instead, I called Johanna Mayer, my attorney. "They're going public," I said. She let out a breath. "Then so are we," she said. That's all it took. The next 8 hours were a masterclass in getting things done. We pulled every single document, every tuition check, every rent payment, every car bill, every insurance policy, and every credit card statement, every single bit of support I had provided ever since the day Ingrid was 4 and her mother died in a hospital that smelled like cleaning products and unfinished stories. We scanned everything, blacked out whatever was necessary, and catalogued all of it. Then I called Britta Schwartz, a senior editor at the Portland Business Gazette. She had written about Schneider Construction 13 years ago when we landed our first big city contract. "Britta," I said, "I have a story you'll want to verify. I'm not looking for sympathy, just the truth." By sunrise the next morning, the story was live. $978,000 in love, one father's record of sacrifice. The headline was right above a banner image of scanned receipts and a spreadsheet that looked more like an official audit than a family ledger. The subheading read, "After being publicly shamed and disinvited from his only daughter's wedding, Klaus Schneider released 25 years of documented financial support, including private education, housing, transportation, and lifestyle costs totaling nearly $1 million. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bitter. It was just facts. Google. By the middle of the morning, the online tide had turned. Comments started to pour in underneath the article. "This man deserves an award, not a lawsuit," one said. "She kicked him out of her wedding after he paid for the whole thing," another wrote. "My dad helped me out with $5,000, and I thank him every week. $978,000. This is insane." The internet, as unpredictable as it is, has one useful trait: it loves a good set of receipts. I didn't feel like a champion. I just felt sad, because it never should have had to come to this. The love I had for Ingrid was never meant to be used as a weapon. But now it had to be documented, so I wouldn't be completely erased. Around noon, I got a call from the Oregon Contractors Union. "Klaus," the director of the board said. "We saw the story. Just wanted you to know we've got your back." He didn't have to say anything else. That was enough. 4 hours later, the local Lions Club released a statement supporting transparent family communication and recognizing the often invisible sacrifices of single parents. That's code for "We believe him." By sundown, local radio hosts were discussing it. One of them called it a cautionary tale about modern entitlement. Another one said, "Every dad in America is probably printing out his receipts right now." Ingrid didn't post anything that day. Helmut, however, did. He put up a short paragraph on a professional networking site. "Our wedding was disrupted by unfortunate miscommunications," it read. "We are focusing on healing and thank our community for its support." It was corporate, vague, and cowardly. I didn't respond, but the silence around them got louder and louder. That night, Ingrid finally called. For the first time in days, I answered. "Dad," she said, her voice so small. "What is happening?" "You tell me," I said. "I just never thought you'd go public," she said. "I never thought you'd lie." There was a long pause. "I didn't lie," she finally said. "I just didn't explain the whole thing. You told the world I was a bitter, controlling father who ruined your wedding out of pride. You just forgot to mention the $978,000 that paid for your entire adult life. I didn't know what else to do." People were asking questions. Helmut's family was furious. "So you gave them a villain," I said. "I panicked," she said. "No," I replied. "You curated." Her voice broke then, not in some big dramatic way, just a quiet little crack. The sound of someone's reflection finally starting to change shape. "I saw the article," she whispered. "Good," I said. "Now the world sees what I've seen for years." She didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She just said, "I don't know how to fix this." And I replied, "Maybe for once, don't try to fix it. Just sit in it. Feel it." There was silence again, but this time it didn't feel like she was avoiding anything. It felt more like she was finally acknowledging it. Later that week, I got a letter from Helmut's father, handwritten on fancy paper. He thanked me for my transparency. He said his family had been caught off guard and was re-evaluating its understanding of the situation. Translation: they had been sold a fake story and were now cleaning up the public relations mess. I didn't respond, because this was never about what the Brandt family believed. It was about what Ingrid had refused to see until now. She didn't post anything for days. Her page went quiet. The likes slowed down. The comments changed from sympathy to suspicion. People were asking about the tuition costs, the wedding invoices, the cars, the trips abroad. They weren't attacking anymore. They were just asking questions, and Ingrid had no answers. The story had moved from emotion to evidence, and in that space, I didn't need to say a thing. I just had to stand still and let the truth do what it always does, wait patiently while the lies run out of air. They say a reputation is like glass. Once it's cracked, it never really goes back to the way it was. But Ingrid had spent years polishing hers to a shine so bright that no one had ever noticed the fractures underneath. That shine started to fade fast. First a little flicker, then a total blackout. For days after the article went live, her carefully curated world started to fall apart. It started quietly, like all real collapses do. The whispers weren't coming from tabloids or gossip blogs. They were coming from the places that mattered most to her, the charity board she chaired, the marketing firm she worked for, and, most ironically, the mentorship program she had co-founded for empowered young women navigating difficult family dynamics. The irony was not lost on me. I didn't gloat. I didn't repost a single thing. I didn't share any screenshots or write any vague statuses. I just let it unfold like rain, something inevitable, cleansing, and uncomfortable. Because I wasn't trying to cause her downfall. I had simply stepped out of her narrative and let the truth fill in the space I had left behind. The director of the local nonprofit where Ingrid volunteered sent a polite but very short email. It said, "We'd like to give things some space while we figure out what's been happening." Her marketing agency put her on temporary leave. And her inbox, which used to be filled with brand offers, was suddenly dead quiet. Helmut, on the other hand, did exactly what cowards do when the light gets too bright. He just disappeared. He didn't return her calls. He didn't stand up for her. He didn't even show up to the 3 press events they had scheduled as a newlywed couple. Rumor had it his family held a private meeting at the Lakeside Country Club, a meeting Ingrid wasn't invited to. She moved back into their apartment alone that week. The white Bentley that had once been their big prize now sat under a tarp in the garage like a forgotten old car. And me? I just kept building. Every morning, I was at my new housing development by 6:45. Hard hat on, clipboard in hand, and a thermos of black coffee. I shook hands with the electricians and drywall guys. I went over blueprints. I handled permits. I poured all my energy into structure, into things that could be measured, leveled, and squared. Because a heart has no blueprints, but a foundation does. One morning, while I was looking at some plumbing schematics, Sabine came up to me. She was holding her phone with a strange look on her face. "You might want to see this," she said. It was a live stream. There was Ingrid, sitting alone in a dimly lit room that was probably their apartment. No makeup, her hair in a messy bun, the sparkle gone from her eyes. Her voice trembled, not from being nervous, but from a deep exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion you only get when the mask you wear finally shatters and all you have left is the real person you never wanted anyone to see. She looked right into the camera and said, "To everyone I misled, whether I meant to or not, I'm sorry. I tried to create a version of the story that protected my pride. I shouldn't have. My father didn't deserve what I did to him. None of it. He gave me everything. I just never knew how to say, thank you, without feeling like I owed him something." She paused, looked down, and added, "I confused love with control. And in my desperate need to prove I didn't owe him a thing, I ended up erasing everything he gave me. I just stood there, frozen on the job site. Nail guns were still firing in the background. Men were yelling out measurements. But all I could hear was her voice. The same voice I had known since she was 4 years old, learning how to say the word architect, because she wanted to be just like Dad. "Dad," she said into the camera, her eyes getting watery. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you know that I'm not proud of who I became. I miss being someone you were proud of." I didn't cry. But something inside me shifted. It wasn't like a door opening. It was more like a beam adjusting just enough to be able to carry a different kind of weight. That night, I didn't call her. I didn't text. I just sat by the fireplace, staring into the embers, and thought about every single moment we had shared that wasn't filmed or filtered or posted online. Just her and me, learning how to get through grief, eating dinner on paper plates while I looked at blueprints and she colored in her storybooks. Helmut never appeared in the video. He never commented or reposted it. He was already long gone. Rumors said his family had threatened to cut him off financially if he didn't distance himself. That the prenup I had quietly insisted Ingrid sign months ago, despite her emotional arguments, had become the only thing keeping her from total financial ruin, because Helmut had nothing. When he had to choose between money and marriage, he chose the money. About a week later, Ingrid showed up at my job site. She didn't announce herself. She just stood at the fence, her arms crossed, watching. I saw her between 2 stacks of lumber. I walked over slowly. She didn't say a word. She just handed me a white envelope. Inside was a check. Not an excuse, not a plea, just a check for the full cost of the wedding. I stared at it, then at her. "I got a new contract," she said softly. "They want me to build a brand for a women's recovery program. I told them the whole truth up front. They appreciated me being so open about it. I just nodded. She looked older, not in a tired way, but in a wiser way. The kind of wisdom you don't get from books or seminars. The kind you earn from falling flat on your face with no one to catch you but your own conscience. I wanted to give back what I took, she said. Ingrid, I said, folding the check. You didn't take money. You took something I can't cash. I know, she said. She took a step closer. Her voice was steady now. But maybe this is a start. Then, like the daughter I hadn't seen in years, she smiled. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't for the camera. It was a small, real, tired smile. The kind people give when they're finally done pretending to be anything but human. I didn't hug her. We weren't there yet. But I didn't walk away either. We just stood in silence, surrounded by 2x4s, plywood, and unfinished dreams. For the first time in years, there was no script, no hidden meaning. Just breathing. Just being there. That evening, she posted one more message online, a short one. Sometimes clarity costs you everything you thought mattered and buys back what actually does. I read it once, then deleted every screenshot, every email draft, and every legal document I had saved. I didn't need them anymore, because the real victory wasn't that the world had seen what she'd done. It was that she had. And sometimes, that's more than enough. The envelope was cream-colored, thick paper, with slightly frayed edges, like it had been carried around for a while before she finally delivered it. My name was on the front, written in the kind of careful handwriting Ingrid used when she was first learning cursive. Not the rushed, digital signature she used now. This was different. Intentional. Vulnerable. I found it tucked under the doormat of my home office the morning after she handed me the check. No note, no text to say she'd been by. Just the envelope. When I slid it open and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside, I had to sit down. Dad. I've rewritten this a dozen times, maybe 120. I always get stuck on the first line because how do you talk to the person you wronged when that person also happens to be the only reason you ever stood tall to begin with? I used to think you were invincible, that you didn't feel things the way I did, that it didn't hurt you when I forgot your birthday or skipped Sunday dinners. But then I started remembering moments, not big ones, just little flashes of your silence, of how you'd look out the window a second longer than normal. Of how you never corrected me when I acted like your sacrifices were just expected. You never made me feel guilty, but I made myself proud of things I never earned. I think the worst part of growing up is realizing who you disappointed, not by accident, but on purpose. I thought I was building a life, but I was just building a wall. And now I'm standing on the other side of it, looking at everything I lost. And I'm so sorry. You always said that foundations matter. You can decorate any room you want, but if the ground's not solid, it'll all fall down. Well, mine cracked, and all the mirrors shattered with it, but I'm ready to rebuild if you'll let me. Love. Ingrid. I read it 5 times, maybe 6. The words weren't perfect. There were smudges in the ink, a line that had been crossed out and rewritten, but it was real. It was more real than any apology text or Instagram caption or public statement. And still, I didn't call her. Because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a doorway you walk right through. It's a long hallway. And you don't sprint down it. You walk one step at a time, often alone, until you're ready to meet someone in the middle. Instead, I made some coffee, black with no sugar, and went to work. The office was quiet that day. Sabine was out sick, and the crew was on another job site. I sat at my desk, her letter next to my drafting tools, and stared out the window at the empty dirt lot that would one day be a community park. All I could hear was the low hum of the ceiling fan and the faint whisper of memory. That's when I saw him. Helmet. He was standing just outside the gate, sunglasses on, hands in his pockets, wearing the same smug expression he had the first time he shook my hand. Only now, it looked faded and fragile, like an old painting left too long in the sun. I didn't wave him in. He came in anyway. "Mr. Schneider," he began, his voice low, like he was doing me a favor by not being louder. "I thought we should talk." "You're not her husband anymore," I said flatly. "I don't owe you that." He hesitated, then tried a different tone, a little slicker. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Things escalated. But I genuinely cared for Ingrid. I still do." I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch out. "She doesn't need you to care. She needed you to show up." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Save it. If you're here to win her back, don't even try. That chapter is closed. She knows who you are now, and more importantly, so do you." He swallowed hard. His confidence began to crack at the corners. "So what now? You just walk away like none of this matters." "I already walked away," I said, standing up, folding Ingrid's letter, and putting it in the drawer. "Now it's your turn." He left without another word. That night, I did something I hadn't done in 23 years. I took out the plans for my house. The one I had designed but never built. The one I was saving for something, for someone. I opened the blueprints, ran my hands over the faded lines, and began to make revisions. Not because I needed a new place to live, but because one day Ingrid might. And when she was ready to rebuild, I wanted to have a foundation waiting. The next morning, I was up with the sun, not because of an alarm, but because I couldn't stay in bed a minute longer. My mind had been working all night, sketching things out. Not dreams or memories, but rafters and beams, windows, load-bearing walls, a front porch that wrapped around like open arms. I got up before the coffee was done brewing and drove straight to the site. The land I had owned for decades but had never broken ground on, a sloped acre outside of town overlooking the reservoir. The kind of view you don't buy, you wait for. I stood there in work boots and a flannel shirt, a little older than some of my crew, just watching the light change across the lot. The morning air still had the last bit of summer in it, but I could feel autumn coming. The kind of crisp air that makes you believe in fresh starts. I hadn't told Ingrid. Not yet. I wasn't ready. And maybe she wasn't either. But something in that letter, the way her words stumbled but didn't stop, had made a space for something new. Not full forgiveness, but a possibility. And that was enough to get started. I began marking the corners with stakes and ribbon, mapping out the perimeter of what would be the new house. It wasn't just a shelter. It was a blueprint for healing, for patience, for a new life stitched together with intent. And every time I drove a stake into the ground, I whispered something I hadn't said out loud in years: "She's still my daughter." 4 days later, she called. Not a text message, a real call. "Hi, Dad," she said. "Ingrid." A pause long enough to hold the weight of all the things we hadn't said. I was wondering if you'd be open to getting coffee sometime. Just coffee, public place, no pressure. I looked at the phone like it might disappear. I cleared my throat. "There's a place by the canal," I said. "You still like the scones with rosemary and sea salt?" I heard a soft laugh, quiet but real. "You remember that? I built your high chair from scrap wood in the garage," I said. "There's not much I forget." We met the next morning. She wore gray slacks and a blue blazer, looking very professional, almost guarded. But her hair was down. I noticed that. She always used to wear it that way when she was happy. The conversation was slow at first, too polite. Like two people pretending they didn't once know every single version of each other. But as the coffee cooled and the plates emptied, she started to talk about her real life. Not the one she used to put out in a press release. The quiet grief of the divorce. The therapy sessions she almost quit twice. The morning she cried in the parking garage before a meeting. And finally, she said, "I've been thinking about moving." I nodded slowly. Out of the city. She looked out the window. Out of the life I thought I wanted. We didn't make any plans that day. No promises. But when I got back to the site that afternoon, I changed the window orientation in the guest room. I made sure it faced east toward the trees she loved as a kid, just in case. Weeks went by like that, quietly. We didn't see each other a lot, but the quiet moments weren't so tense anymore. They felt more like a space being held open. Ingrid started dropping by the job site now and then. Sometimes she'd show up with lunch, other times she'd just stand and watch. She never picked up a tool and never gave any advice on the design, but her presence changed everything I hammered into place. One afternoon, she brought over an old photo from the house she grew up in. She didn't say a word, just left it on the workbench near where the kitchen was going to be. It was a picture of us on the front steps, her hands all sticky from a popsicle, my shirt stained with motor oil. We were just smiling, not posing, just real. I tucked it into my back pocket and didn't say anything, but I worked harder that day than I had in years. One evening in late fall, just as we were starting the drywall, she stood in the space that would become the living room. She had her hands on her hips, just looking around. "You remember the old fireplace?" she asked me. "Yeah, I remember," I said. "The bricks were always coming loose. I swore I'd rip the whole thing out every winter. I used to hide notes behind it," she said, "little drawings and letters to Santa." She turned to me. Do you think we could have one here? Not the same, but something that feels like that." "I already drew one up," I told her. She didn't answer right away. Then she gave me a real smile, like the letter she'd written had turned into something you could actually build with. The work on the site continued. The crew even picked up on the new tone. It felt less like a job and more like a special project. Even the younger guys stopped swearing so much. We weren't just putting up walls. We were making room. Then, just as we were planning out the cabinets, Ingrid showed up with a folder. "I've been working on something," she said, handing it to me. Inside were pages of scrawled notes and lists, not just about the house, but about rebuilding trust, a whole new framework for our relationship. She had taken my old saying, "Foundations matter," and turned it into something bigger, a real set of principles you could live by. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the woman who had left or the daughter who had let me down. I just saw a person. Flawed, yeah, but trying. And trying, I've come to realize, counts more than we ever admit. "I was thinking," she said, her voice suddenly so small. "Once this place is finished, maybe I could move in for a bit. Just until I find my own place." I didn't say yes. I didn't have to. I just stepped aside, handed her the tape measure, and let her mark the next beam. As she leaned down and pulled the pencil from behind her ear the way I used to, I felt something shift. It wasn't a conclusion. It wasn't closure. It was the beginning of something more solid than both. The beginning of a home. It was Ingrid who asked for dinner. Not just for coffee or a quick lunch where everything could be swept under the rug in 45 minutes with a polite hug. No, she wanted a real dinner. She made the reservation herself and sent it to me in a text message with just one line, "I'd like to sit with you." No expectations, just being present. It was the first Thursday of spring, the kind of day that just had a feeling of promise in the air. Dandelions were popping out of cracks in the sidewalk, porch lights stayed on longer, and you could hear people's footsteps without the crunch of winter under their feet. I put on the navy blue jacket my old girlfriend, Helga, once told me made me look like I still had plans. Ingrid showed up in a simple gray dress and flats, her hair pulled back with minimal effort but maximum vulnerability. The restaurant was quiet, nothing fancy, the kind of place with real wooden tables and cloth napkins that had been washed so many times they were no longer white. We didn't order right away. We just sat across from each other, letting the air settle and the unsaid words lap quietly around the table. I am ready to provide the final part of your story, rewritten according to all your instructions. A rebuilt life. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She tried once more. Do you remember the time I broke your level while I was trying to fix that porch step? She asked. I just blinked. You were 13, I said. I figured if I fixed it before you got home, you wouldn't notice it had cracked. She looked down. I used too much glue. It hardened all wrong. The step was wobblier, and the level was useless. I smiled a little. I remember. I also remember never saying a word about it. She looked down at her hands. I've thought about that so many times. How you just kept walking over that uneven step like it didn't even matter. It didn't, I said. Not compared to what you were trying to do. She nodded slowly. That's it, isn't it? You always notice the effort, not just the result. I think I forgot how to do that somewhere along the way. I started chasing titles, perfection, applause, and I stopped recognizing what you'd been teaching me all along, that character doesn't need a spotlight. Our food arrived. We ate slowly, the way people do when they don't want the meal to end. She didn't apologize again. She didn't have to. The apology was already in the letter, in the check, in her voice, in the way she folded her napkin like she was handling a memory. Helmut filed for bankruptcy, she said after a while. I didn't respond. I found out he borrowed against my accounts, spent money I didn't even know was missing. The condo, it's gone. The lake house, too. Everything he used to measure our worth is gone. I still said nothing, not out of pride, but just out of practice. He came to see me. Said he wanted to try again, that we could start over. My eyes met hers. I said no. There was something so final in her voice. Not angry, just finished. Like a door closing with the quiet click of certainty. I told him I needed to start over, but not with him. With myself. She reached into her purse and pulled out a smaller envelope this time, a sky blue one. She slid it across the table. I filed the paperwork last week. This is the confirmation. Divorce is final. The lawyers were stunned by how clean it was. I didn't fight him on anything. I didn't want his debt. I didn't want his name. I just wanted to be able to breathe again. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't need to. I still don't know who I am without all the noise, she admitted. But for the first time, I actually want to find out. We sat in silence again, but this time it was warm and shared, like two people sitting on opposite ends of a seesaw that had finally found its balance. After dinner, we walked outside. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting soft circles of light on the sidewalk. Ingrid walked with her hands in her coat pockets, just like she did as a teenager. I remembered walking beside her after soccer games, the way she'd just shrug off a loss and joke about her muddy socks. I remembered the girl she had been, and I finally saw the woman she was becoming. At the corner, just before we went our separate ways, she turned to me. Dad, can I ask you something selfish? I raised an eyebrow. Would you consider letting me help build the house? The one you're working on right now. It's yours, maybe mine one day. I want to learn what you know. Not to take over, just to understand what it takes to build something that lasts. I didn't answer right away. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a folded square of paper, and handed it to her. She opened it. It was a copy of the original blueprint I'd redrawn last week. Her name was on the title block, not as the owner, but as a designer's trainee. Her hand shook. You already decided? She asked. I just nodded. I was just waiting to hear you ask. She blinked hard, then tucked the paper carefully into her purse like it was something sacred. As she crossed the street and waved goodbye, I stood under the lamplight and realized something. Forgiveness doesn't always show up like thunder. Sometimes it shows up like this. Quietly, earned, and ongoing. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I slept like a man whose foundation had finally been reinforced. Spring just flowed into summer, the way ink seeps into a shirt pocket, slowly, surely, and with no way to stop it. Ingrid started showing up at the lot every other morning. No makeup, her hair tied back with a pencil, jeans with paint smudges. She brought her own gloves and coffee for both of us, black for me and oat milk for her. She never complained about the heat or the early hours or the way the sun made the metal toolboxes so hot they burned your hands. She worked like someone trying to understand something with her whole body. And I let her. The first few days were quiet. The work itself was a good buffer, measuring joists, mixing concrete, pouring footings. We didn't need to fill the silence. The nail gun did it for us. But eventually, the quiet moments changed. They softened. They became a space for questions. "How do you know where to put the very first stake?" she asked me once, holding the surveyor's map and squinting. "You start from where you know the ground is solid," I said. "Find your anchor. Everything else lines up from there." She nodded slowly, but I could tell she was thinking about more than just the words. I could see her applying it to more than just a foundation line. One morning, a truck pulled up without warning. I recognized the man before he even got out, Pudo, from the county office. He used to be on my bowling team back when I still did things like bowl. "Morning, Klaus. Heard you finally pulled out those old plans. Figured I'd come see if you're making good on them." "You were always a curious one," I said, shaking his hand. Udo turned to Ingrid. She held out her hand. "Ingrid, trainee," she said, meeting his eyes with a quiet certainty. Udo raised an eyebrow, then gave me a nod that said more than any words could. We passed the inspection that day. Ingrid triple-checked every measurement afterward anyway. "You don't trust Udo?" I asked. "I trust him," she said. "I just don't trust luck. Not anymore." And that was Ingrid now, still herself, but sanded down, tempered, not brittle, just honest. Midway through June, we hit our first problem. The lumber delivery was late. The trusses didn't match the drawings. We had to figure it out on the fly. Ingrid stayed up late working on load calculations with a pencil and ruler. Not a spreadsheet, not an app, just her hands. When she brought the sketches the next day, I sat down and really looked at them. "This is good," I said. She frowned. "It's not perfect. I had to change some of the spans." "You didn't change them," I said. "You adapted. That's what builders do." She stared at the drawing, then at me. "Why didn't you teach me this sooner?" I took a breath. "Because you weren't ready. And maybe I wasn't either." We didn't talk about Helmut anymore, not directly. He was a name buried under old framing scraps. Once or twice, I caught her looking at her phone, pausing for too long, but she never brought it up, and I didn't ask. That was part of our new deal. No rewinding, only reviewing. By early July, the frame was up. Ingrid hammered the final nail on the ridge beam herself. It echoed like a bell. "Want to mark it?" I asked, handing her a marker. She didn't hesitate. She wrote one word on the inside of the beam, where the drywall would hide it forever. "Stay." I nodded. "Good word. You think it'll hold?" I asked. "I think it already is," she said. We sat on the edge of the framing, our legs dangling. Below us, the dirt lot looked less like a project and more like a promise. The wind picked up. It smelled like sawdust and sun. "Do you miss her?" Ingrid asked quietly. I knew who she meant. Helga. "Every day," I said. "But differently now." "How?" she asked. "Before, I missed her like a wound. Now, I miss her like a foundation. She's not absent. She's beneath everything. Ingrid looked down, blinking fast. That night you told me I wasn't welcome at the wedding. I said to myself, do you remember what you were wearing? She shook her head. No. You had on those pearl earrings, I said, the ones your mom left you. She touched her ears, even though they were bare. Even then, I said, you were carrying her with you. You just didn't know it. She let out a slow breath. Maybe I was just afraid she wouldn't be proud of me. She was, flaws and all, because she saw who you were underneath, I said. The rest was just noise. We watched the sun sink below the trees. The light turned golden, the kind of gold you don't notice until it's slipping away. The next morning, Ingrid beat me to the site. When I arrived, she was already measuring for insulation. Her hair was tucked under a cap, and she was humming. Something light, something unafraid. We didn't talk much that day. We just worked, the way people do when there's nothing left to prove, only things left to build. That night, she handed me a small folder. Inside was a revised design for the entryway, wider stairs, a deeper porch. She had even added a porch swing. I thought maybe one day, if I have kids, they'd need somewhere to sit, she said. I studied the drawing. It was clean, functional, and beautiful. You don't need my approval, I said, but you have it. She smiled a real smile. And just like that, the blueprint wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. We had built more than a house. We had built a place where she could come back to, and maybe one day, a place she could leave from again, stronger. Because that's what good homes do. They hold you. And when the time is right, they let you go. The morning of the groundbreaking was quiet. No band, no speeches, just the earth, the sound of our breathing, and the slow scrape of shovels cutting through the dirt. Ingrid stood next to me in jeans and a work jacket, her hair tied back, her boots covered in early spring mud. I handed her the first shovel. She didn't hesitate, bent her knees, and pushed the blade into the ground with her whole body's weight. When she lifted it out, a clean block of soil fell to the side like a ribbon being dropped. We were building it together, not just the house, but the trust, the time, the unspoken hours that had passed between us like shadows across a sundial. We were reclaiming each moment by driving nails into new timber and laying brick where there had once been silence. The lot was modest, just west of town, framed by sycamores and a quiet wind. I had owned it for years but never touched it. It was always meant for something sacred. Not flashy, not big, just right. And now, finally, it would hold the home I had imagined decades ago, with a wide porch, a sloping roof, a library that caught the morning light and a kitchen window facing the sunrise. Ingrid worked like someone who didn't need to prove anything, just someone who needed to feel. She measured every line twice, asked questions when she was unsure, and never pretended. That was new. That was earned. We didn't talk about the wedding anymore or about Helmut or the months she hadn't called. Some things didn't need to be revisited because they had already taught us their lesson. Instead, we talked about insulation, about the grain of the wood, about whether we should paint the upstairs study or leave it natural. We talked about why a front door matters, because it's the only part of a house you open with intention every single day. Sometimes, when the work was done, we'd sit on overturned buckets and sip cold tea. Ingrid would sketch. I would watch the clouds. One afternoon, she handed me a page. It was a rough drawing. The house was in charcoal with a soft garden drawn around the back. You changed the pitch of the roof, I said. She nodded. To catch more rainwater for the barrels. I smiled. You think like a builder now. I think like someone who wants to stay, she said. That hit me hard. Not because it was sentimental, but because it was true. I had spent so many years watching her leave, for college, for jobs, for men, for an escape. And now she was staying. Not because she was stuck, but because she had chosen to be here. One night, after the walls were up and the frames were secured, we stood together in what would one day be the living room. The beams were still exposed. The floor was still plywood, but it held the shape of a space meant for people to be together. Ingrid looked around and whispered, "This is where I want to have my next wedding, if I ever have one." I didn't flinch. "You deserve someone who shows up," I said. She looked at me, really looked, and said, "So do you." Maybe that was the final healing. Not her apology, not the construction, but the recognition that both of us, in our own ways, had settled for an absence before, and neither of us would do that again. By fall, the house had a roof. By winter, it had windows. By spring, it had a soul. We moved in on a Tuesday, not with a moving truck, just with boxes, blankets, and laughter. I took the back room. Ingrid took the loft. We shared the kitchen, the porch, and the quiet evenings that only belong to people who have known distance and have come back from it. Neighbors dropped by with casseroles and cautious curiosity. They had questions, of course, about the story, about the scandal, about the wedding that never was. But they didn't ask them out loud. And we didn't offer the story. Not because it was a secret, but because it wasn't the most important part anymore. The most important part was the present. The way the house smelled of cedar and new paint. The way Ingrid hummed while she watered plants. The way the mail arrived with both our names on the mailbox. And one evening, a particularly crisp one in early November, I found something on the front steps. Not a letter, not a check, a photo. It was of Ingrid, about 8 years old, sitting on my shoulders at a county fair. Her hands were gripping my forehead. My smile was wide. Her laugh was even wider. It wasn't in a frame, just tucked into a folded piece of paper. The note said, "Don't forget who you've always been. With love, She hadn't signed her name, but she didn't have to. I walked back inside, slid the photo onto the mantel, and just stood for a moment, breathing. For so many years, I had defined success as silence, as the absence of a mess or mistakes. But now, I knew better. Success was building something that could hold the weight of all that had come before and still stand. That was the house. That was Ingrid. That was me. And if you ever find yourself holding a blueprint of a life you thought you lost, I hope you remember this. Foundations can be rebuilt. Love can come back in a different form. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't justice. It's peace.